Welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast, helping engineers, producers, and artists create professional recordings and mixes, even from home. I'm your host, Mike Indovina. Let's get started. Hey, welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike Indovina, and thank you for hanging out with me today. Today's episode is a special one. It's a little different than our normal interview format. It's going to be a little bit quicker as well, but it's all because I have a very special announcement for you today, and I want to talk a little bit more about this because I'm super excited for it. And that is that my new book, The Recording Mindset, is now officially out. I am super excited for you guys to get your hands on this book. This book is all about giving you a step-by-step guide for creating pro recordings from your home studio. And whether you have the equipment already or whether you're thinking about getting into recording your own music, this book is going to walk you through everything you need to know to get pro results. And this isn't just a book where I explain one way of doing things and expect that that's going to work for every single song. No, the reality is that every single song is different. And everyone has their own vision for what they want their songs to sound like. And you're going to have your own references for what you want your songs to sound like too. So this book really focuses on helping you understand how to cater the recording process to get the results that your music requires and that you ultimately hear in your head. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Mike, didn't you put out a book already about mixing and how to get great results there? And the truth is, yes, I did. I put out a book a while ago called The Mixing Mindset, which was an Amazon #1 seller, and it breaks down the process of mixing step by step. But the reality is that great mixes start with great recordings. Despite all of the information that's in that book, which will show you how to get a great mix, if you start off with a poor recording, you're still only going to get it so far. So you need to learn how to get it right at the source. And the way to do that is that you need to get very clear on what it is that you want your recordings to sound like before you even start hitting record, before you set up a single mic or get your instruments ready. You need to have a clear vision for what you want that sound to be. You need to be able to define how the drums are going to sound, how the guitars are going to sound, the vocals, bass, all that kind of stuff, so that you can come up with your game plan for actually setting up your equipment and getting those results right at the source. And it actually reminds me of a little story from many years ago. I got to tour with Kiss. And on that tour, I got to have some amazing conversations with Gene Simmons and the other guys in the band. But one conversation that really stood out to me and that has always kind of just stuck in my mind was that Gene Simmons had mentioned this idea that you can't polish a turd. You can spray paint it gold, but at the end of the day, it's still a turd. And I don't know why, but that line always resonated with me. And the more I think about it, the more I realize how it relates to things like mixing, right? Where so many people try to fix things in the mix. They rush through the process. They don't really take any consideration in terms of what their songs should sound like. And they just think that when I get to the mix, I'll add the plugins and I'll have fun there and it'll eventually sound good. So as a result, they just stick up mics blindly, or they follow a process that they do on every single recording and they never stray from that process. And as a result, they end up with tracks that just sound crappy. But the reality is that, like I said, you need to get it right at the source. Every song is different, and you need to be able to modify your process in order to get the sound that those songs deserve. And if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you've heard many of the guests on this podcast talk about it, yet still, so many people rush through this process. And what I see happening time and time again is that people will spend hours, days, weeks, months. I've even heard people say that they've spent years working on their mixes, trying to make them sound great, but constantly hitting this wall with their tracks where they never sound quite as good as they envisioned them to sound. And if that sounds like something you can relate to, your problems might not even be mixing problems. Your problem is most likely your recording. And just by taking that extra time in the recording process to dial in the right settings and to get your instruments set up properly and get the right performance, all that kind of stuff, it can dramatically change the outcome of your productions and make your raw tracks sound even better than most people's best mixes. So that's really what I want for you. I want you to understand this process and know what steps to take early on so that mixing becomes easy, mixing becomes quick, and so that you can feel confident throughout the entire process and not have this hope that later on, either your mixing skills are going to save the day or a mastering engineer is going to save the day. No, we want to record like no one's going to be mixing, and we want to mix like no one's going to be mastering, right? We're always setting ourselves up for the next stage. And I realize that I sound like a broken record saying this, but you have to realize the importance of how every stage feeds into the next. When you have amazing recordings editing becomes significantly easier because you set yourself up by having great takes, great performances. And so there's less to edit just in that alone. But also, you can use some special techniques in the recording process that you're not even going to hear in the final record. But if you take these steps in the recording stage, you can actually make editing instruments like drums and guitars significantly easier and faster. So it's all about how you set this up. And in the book, I break down what those little special tricks are. These will save you so much time, but it all comes down to just setting yourself up properly in the first place. And these are things that pros are using every single day to work faster, work smarter, and get better results. And that's just how having great recordings impacts the editing stage. But it also goes further down the line. It makes mixing significantly easier and much faster because you aren't focused on correction. You're not focused on trying to change the tones of a record or find the vibe of an artist. Instead, all that stuff is taken care of at the very beginning in the recording stage. So when it comes to the mixing, the aesthetic of the record is there. The tones are there. You're just enhancing things. You're finding levels. You're maybe creating some stereo width and stuff like that. But you're not focused on correcting everything. Instead, it's just all about enhancement. And that just makes mixing significantly easier. There's no reason a mix should take you forever to finish. And if you find that you're having that much trouble getting your tracks to work well with each other, it's because you made a mistake in the recording process. Straight up, that's what it is. So get your stuff right. And I've seen this countless times with my coaching students. I'll give one example, and I talk about this in my book. One of my coaching students, Chris, he came to me after having spent years trying to record his own music. And he was getting really frustrated because he had specific records that he was trying to make his music sound like. And he spent years trying to make his songs sound like those records, but could never quite match that quality. So the very first thing I asked him was like, well, how are you recording your instruments? And, he told me how he did it. And it was just kind of his normal process that he did. He stuck up one mic and did it a certain way. And with one small tweak, like literally all I told him was, position your mics in XY position. Try that. And that was because based on the references he was showing me, I could hear that the tracks were stereo. And so I told him how to do it. All of a sudden, he recorded his tracks like that. And he sent me a message the next day being like, holy crap, these sound so much better. And over the course of that next week, he ended up re-recording all of his tracks. And without even mixing them, they already sounded significantly better than his original recordings that he had spent years working on. And that is just one example of how a small tweak can make a big difference. Another one of my coaching students, Jamie, she was having trouble with her vocals. They always sounded kind of crappy and roomy, and she was having a hard time EQing them and getting them to fit right in her mix. It just came down to a single polar pattern change on her microphone. And once we made that small change, again, her tracks just drastically improved. And so I share these stories with you because sometimes it's the smallest detail in the recording chain that can make such a big impact. Things like the guitar picks that you use or the strings that you use, the skins that you put on your drums, the sticks that you use on your drums, what types of cables you use and how long those cables are. There are so many little details that most people overlook throughout this process, but every single little piece contributes to the final sound. So you need to know how those things make an impact in your recording so that you can make the right decisions to get the sound you're after. And that's exactly what this book focuses on. And whether you're a beginner at this or you've been at this for quite some time, this book is going to load you up with the strategies and techniques to help you work smarter, faster, and get better results. So inside of this book, we're going to cover a bunch of different things. And I want to break down just kind of what you can expect inside and how this book addresses everything we've just talked about here. So one of the first things you're going to learn is you're going to understand what the recording mindset is. And you're going to learn the importance of having a clear vision for your songs and how it helps to guide your choices and help you establish a clear game plan to follow throughout the entire process. This is your North Star here. This is going to help you navigate through the numerous decisions you're going to face. So we cover all of that in the book there. Then we're going to get into helping you master the basics and beyond. So you're going to learn about recording various instruments, choosing the right microphones, choosing the right gear, proper placement techniques. We dive into the nitty-gritty of all of that stuff to help make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you need to do in order to get that sound that you hear in your head to come out of your speakers. We talk about quality over gear. And by that, I'm referring to how you don't need the most expensive equipment to make professional recordings. It's all about how you use what you have. So we're going to talk about how to maximize the potential of your existing setup and make the most out of every piece of gear you can access. We're going to talk about how to avoid common pitfalls that most people fall into and how to troubleshoot through common problems that people experience in the studio. And so we cover all of that and more. And basically, the book is broken down into 4 main sections. In section 1, we're going to dive into what that recording mindset is and what it includes, why it's so important. Section 2, we cover all the tools you need in order to make sure that you get pro recordings. In section 3, I walk you through the step-by-step process for recording various instruments. And like I said, we're going to cover microphone selection, placement, tips for capturing great performances, and so much more. And the goal is to make it super easy for you to get amazing results quickly. And then lastly, in section 4, we talk about what to do after you've recorded your tracks and what your next step should be in order to put all of your tracks together and get your songs finished at a pro level. So as you can tell, I am very passionate about this book, and not just because I wrote it, but because I really believe that there are so many problems that can be solved just by taking the time to get your recordings right in the first place. And that is exactly what this book walks through. This book is really like the logical prequel to my other book, The Mixing Mindset. Because when you take everything we talk about in the recording mindset and then you combine it with the mixing mindset, boom, you've got a finished pro result. So with all of that said, if you are struggling to get pro recordings from your home studio, or you're constantly battling mixes and finding it super hard and time consuming to get the results you want, this book is going to show you exactly how to get things right at the source so that you don't have to fight those issues and so that the entire process can be much easier. So with that said, I would love for you to get a copy of this book. Make sure to grab it at therecordingmindset.com. And for this week, I'm talking the week of February 13th, 2024. This book is on sale for an extremely crazy price as part of the launch week. I'm not going to say what the price is here because somebody's going to listen to this episode a month later and they're going to see the price is different and they're going to complain about it. But what I will say is that right now you can get this book for the absolute lowest price it will ever be released at. This is literally the lowest price Amazon will let me sell this book for. So check it out, therecordingmindset.com. That's where you can get your access to the book. And I can't wait to hear all the awesome music you're about to make as a result of implementing this stuff into your process. So that is it for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. I hope that it's given you some inspiration and that it's given you some things to consider as far as how to change your production process to get better results. So one more time, therecordingmindset.com. That is where you can get your copy of the book. And like I said, this week only, it is at the lowest price it will ever be. So definitely make sure to grab it now while you can. With that said, we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around to the very end. I really appreciate it. And next week, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled program with some more interviews and all the stuff that you're used to hearing on the podcast. So once again, thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting with you in the next one. Talk soon. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. To have your questions answered, submit your questions to questions@masteryourmix.com. Please go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. And for more information on how you can improve your mixes, visit MasterYourMix.com.